The village of Little Brackston, situated comfortably among the rolling green hills of the West Country, was the sort of place where everyone knew everyone else's kettle times and hedgerow habits. Stone cottages leaned companionably together, church bells marked out the hours with reassuring regularity, and gossip flowed more freely than the River Mallow after a spring rain. Miss Jane Marple, resident of neighbouring St. Mary Mead, had travelled to Little Brackston at the kind invitation of her old friend Mrs. Lavinia Parrott, a brisk and kindly lady whose fondness for cats was surpassed only by her fondness for conversation. Miss Marple, ever polite, insisted it was perfectly pleasant to leave the roses in the care of her gardener for a few days. Lavinia's pride and joy was Brackston Manor, though manor was perhaps too grand a word for the comfortable, slightly draughty Georgian house with ivy climbing its old red brick walls. Still, it possessed an undeniable charm, high ceilings, a magnificent oak staircase, and a garden thick with lavender and roses. Miss Marple arrived on a soft June afternoon, carpet-bag in hand and a small smile on her face. "My dear Jane," cried Lavinia, ushering her in, "you're just in time for tea. And oh dear, you'll never believe what a to-do we've had this morning." Miss Marple settled herself into the drawing-room, taking in the familiar scent of beeswax polish and Earl Grey. "A to-do, Lavinia? I'm afraid so. Poor Mr. Mortimer, the solicitor, you remember, was found dead at Hartwell Cottage." "Mr. Mortimer," Miss Marple repeated gently. "How very unfortunate, though hardly the sort of man one expects to be involved in a dramatic event." "Indeed, but the doctor says it was his heart." Lavinia paused, lowered her voice, and added, "Though between ourselves, the whole village is buzzing with the idea that something isn't quite right. You know how people talk." Miss Marple sipped her tea thoughtfully. "People seldom speak without reason, even if their conclusions are misguided. The principal characters of the village had already begun to hover around the edges of the incident like moths around a lantern. Mrs. Elena Blakely, elegant widow, owner of Hartwell Cottage, and something of a mystery herself, having moved to the village only a year prior. Harold Finch, the local handyman, large of build and short of temper. Dr. Julian Reeves, a respectable man in his 40s, courteous yet noticeably strained of late. Alice Mortimer, the solicitor's niece, newly arrived from London to settle her uncle's affairs, reserved, intelligent, and with eyes that missed very little. Cyril Godfrey, chairman of the parish council, known for loud opinions and discreet debts. "I understand Mr. Mortimer had called at Hartwell Cottage yesterday evening," Lavinia continued. "Mrs. Blakely claims it was merely a matter concerning the cottage deeds." "Curious," Miss Marple murmured. "Property matters don't usually become urgent enough to provoke late calls." Before Lavinia could reply, a maid entered carrying a small silver tray. "Excuse me, madame. We've just finished clearing the breakfast things from the morning room, and we found this." On the tray lay an old ceramic teapot, blue and white with hairline cracks. Miss Marple recognized it immediately. Lavinia had owned it for years. But what commanded attention was the envelope sticking half out of the spout, as though someone had hidden it in a moment of panic. Lavinia let out a faint cry. Good heavens, who put that there? The envelope was yellowed slightly and bore no name on the outside. Miss Marple, with Lavinia's permission, slid out the paper from within. The handwriting, tight and hurried, read, "I know the truth. Meet me at Hartwell Cottage tonight at 9:30. Come alone. There must be no more lies." It was unsigned. Miss Marple exchanged a look with Lavinia. "My dear, I think your to-do may be rather more serious than you imagined." And it was at that moment, tea cooling beside them, roses nodding in the garden outside, that Miss Marple first felt that small spark of intuition, a whisper of suspicion, that something very wrong indeed lay behind Mr. Mortimer's untimely death. The following morning dawned bright and deceptively peaceful. Miss Marple, well wrapped in a soft grey shawl, walked with Lavinia to Hartwell Cottage. The cottage was a charming little structure with climbing roses and tall chimneys, looking wholly at odds with the idea of clandestine meetings or mysterious letters. Mrs. Elena Blakeley greeted them with her habitual poise. She was a tall woman with a cool elegance that suggested an old upbringing and carefully managed appearances. Jane Marple, Lavinia introduced, an old friend. She's staying with me. Mrs. Blakeley smiled faintly. Of course, I've heard a great deal about you, Miss Marple. Only good things, I hope, Miss Marple said in her mild manner. They were shown to the sitting-room. The atmosphere, Miss Marple noted, held a faint tension. On the coffee table lay a bundle of papers tied with string. Property documents, most likely. Miss Marple asked gently, I understand, Mr. Mortimer visited you yesterday. Yes, he did. He wished to review the cottage deed. A minor matter. Elena's hands, folded neatly, trembled slightly. Forgive me, Mrs. Blakeley, Miss Marple said, but had he seemed quite himself? Elena hesitated. Now that you mention it, he appeared uneasy, distracted. He asked several questions about the property's previous owners. I assured him I knew little about them. Miss Marple tucked this away. On the path outside they met Harold Finch, stained overalls and arms crossed, mourning. He muttered. His eyes flickered nervously between them. Mr. Finch, Miss Marple said kindly, I hear you were working late in this neighbourhood last night. Harold stiffened. Just fixing a gate. Nothing to do with the solicitor? Of course, Miss Marple murmured, though I believe you once did repair work for Mr. Mortimer. He scowled. Ages ago. He paid poorly and quibbled over everything. A motive, perhaps. Or perhaps only ill humour. Next, Miss Marple visited Dr. Julian Reeves, whose surgery smelt of antiseptic and wilted carnations. He rubbed his forehead tiredly. Heart failure. He reiterated, these things happen. And yet, Miss Marple said softly, you look troubled. He gave a strained smile. It has been a difficult month. Miss Marple knew better than to press. Her final call was on Alice Mortimer, the deceased's niece, who answered the door with composed politeness. Her dark hair was neatly pinned, and her manner held the self-possession of someone accustomed to relying upon herself. I've just come from sorting my uncle's papers, Alice said. He was more stressed than he let on. May I ask about his recent work? Miss Marple inquired. I'm not sure, but Alice paused. He mentioned someone had threatened him. He didn't say who. This, Miss Marple thought, was very interesting indeed. Before leaving, Alice added, and one more thing. Someone searched my uncle's study last night. Drawers open, papers moved. Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. Then someone believes your uncle left something behind worth finding. Rumours ran like wildfire by the next day. Cyril Godfrey claimed to have seen Mr. Mortimer arguing with a stranger in the lane. Mrs. Penworthy from the post office insisted she heard shouting from Hartwell Cottage at 9:30, and Lavinia's gardener swore he spotted Harold Finch near the cottage at the same time. Miss Marple, sitting in Lavinia's sunny garden, examined the letter found in the teapot. Why, there, of all places, someone with access to the manor, someone who needed it hidden quickly. That afternoon she accompanied Lavinia to the parish hall, where preparations for the village flower show were underway. There Miss Marple observed interactions with keen interest. Harold Finch, normally bullish, avoided eye contact with everyone. Dr. Reeves spoke sharply to Mrs. Blakeley, who responded with icy courtesy. Alice Mortimer stood alone, studying a telephone in the hallway, as though expecting a call. Cyril Godfrey, meanwhile, strutted about while perspiring heavily. A sudden commotion startled the hall. Mrs. Blakely had fainted. Miss Marple reached her quickly. "My dear, are you unwell?" I'm fine," Elena said weakly, but her eyes darted towards Cyril Godfrey before she looked away. It was a telling glance. Later that evening, as Miss Marple passed the manor library, she saw Lavinia's cat batting at something on the rug. A folded piece of paper, another letter, it read. "You have until tomorrow. Produce the document, or everything comes out." Miss Marple's suspicions tightened. This was no coincidence. Someone believed Mr. Mortimer Possessor had passed on a certain document, one that threatened a secret. She thought of Mrs. Blakely's past, Finch's temper, Dr. Reeves's stress, Godfrey's debts, Alice's discoveries. Any might be hiding something. Then a shout came from outside. Miss Marple hurried out to find Harold Finch standing over Alice Mortimer near the garden gate. She was unhurt, but shaken. He grabbed at me. Alice cried. "I just wanted a word," Finch snapped. Miss Marple noted Harold's agitation, and Alice's oddly calm reaction. Something between them was not as it appeared. The stakes had unmistakably risen. Miss Marple requested Lavinia allow her a quiet morning in the manor study. Here she laid out the puzzle pieces neatly upon the desk. Piece 1, the mysterious late night visit. Mr. Mortimer had gone to Hartwell Cottage on the night of his death at 9:30 p.m., the exact time mentioned in the first letter. Piece 2, the Teapot letter. Someone at Brackston Manor hid it hurriedly. Only Lavinia, her staff, and her immediate visitors had access. Piece 3, the second threatening note. Clearly part of a larger exchange. Blackmail, most likely. Piece 4, the restless suspects. All had secrets, but only one had a secret worth killing for. Miss Marple took a brisk walk to clear her thoughts. She stopped at Hartwell Cottage, where Mrs. Blakely, pale but composed, invited her in. "Mrs. Blakely," Miss Marple began, "I knew someone once, dear old Mrs. Weatherford, whose husband had rather a complicated past before she married him. She found ignorance more comfortable than the truth." Elena froze. Miss Marple continued, "You too, I believe, have felt the need to escape the past." Tears pricked Elena's eyes. "I was once married to a man who dealt in questionable investments. When it collapsed, he took his own life. I changed my name. I simply wanted peace." "And someone discovered your identity?" She nodded. "A man claiming to be my late husband's associate contacted me. He demanded money. I told no one." Miss Marple asked gently, "Did Mr. Mortimer know?" "No, but he asked strange questions about previous owners. I feared the truth was resurfacing." It was a sad story, but not a motive for murder. Not unless Elena believed Mortimer was connected to the blackmailer, which she denied. Miss Marple next visited Dr. Reeves. She observed him closely, the trembling hands, the curt responses. "You are a tired man, Doctor," Reeves sighed. "I'm trying to keep my practice afloat. Godfrey and I had a disagreement. He owes me money. And Mr. Mortimer, he confronted me about certain prescriptions, harmless tonics, really, but he believed I was being irresponsible. Also insufficient by itself. It was only when she reached the village bank that the last essential clue dropped neatly into place. The manager informed her, quite innocently, that Mr. Mortimer had recently retrieved an old sealed envelope from their safe, deposit archive, one stored by a former client, which client, Miss Marple asked mildly, Mr. Harold Finch. Miss Marple blinked. Harold Finch, of all people. Back at Lavinia's, Miss Marple requested a private word with Finch. He arrived sullen, defensive. "Mr. Finch," she began, "I believe Mr. Mortimer discovered something about you." Finch stiffened noticeably. "You were once involved," Miss Marple continued, "in a workplace dispute, a serious one, A man injured, perhaps. Something unpleasant you would prefer remained buried. His face reddened. It was years ago. An accident. And yet— Miss Marple said softly, "I imagine the matter looked very different on paper. The sealed papers you entrusted to the solicitor years back, thinking they'd never be revisited." Finch opened his mouth, shut it, swallowed. "Someone reopened that file," Miss Marple went on. "Mr. Mortimer doing a routine audit. Read what you had hoped forgotten. You believed he meant to expose you." Finch shook his head violently. "I didn't kill him. No," Miss Marple said quietly. "You panicked. You were desperate. But panic alone doesn't place threatening letters in teapots." He looked bewildered. "Letters? I never wrote any letters." Miss Marple believed him. Finch was too blunt a man for such melodrama. And then, very suddenly, everything aligned: the late-night meeting, the hidden teapot letter, the second note referencing a document. Miss Marple turned slowly. Miss Mortimer. Alice stood in the doorway, face composed but eyes hard. "You were listening," Miss Marple said gently. Alice stepped forward. "I suppose it had to come out." Lavinia gasped. "My dear, surely you don't mean—" Miss Marple raised a hand lightly. "Let her speak." Alice's voice was cool, taut. "My uncle was about to ruin everything. He had discovered irregularities in accounts, investments, funds missing from his clients." Miss Marple asked, "From me?" Alice said, "I managed some of his accounts part-time. He trusted me. Too much, perhaps." Her jaw tightened. "I meant to replace the money. I nearly had. But he confronted me on the night he died." Miss Marple nodded sympathetically. "You sent the letter, asking him to meet you at Hartwell Cottage." "Yes, I thought I could persuade him to give me time. Instead, he talked of resigning, reporting everything. My future would have been destroyed." "And so," Miss Marple said softly, "you argued." "It wasn't murder," Alice insisted. "He had a weak heart." He grew enraged, shouting, then suddenly clutched his chest. "I tried to help. I swear I did. But he collapsed." Miss Marple sighed. "A natural death, then. But everything you did afterwards, that was guilt." Alice nodded, eyes glistening. "I panicked. I thought if people knew he'd met someone at the cottage, they'd assume, well, the worst, so I hid the letter. But then I feared he'd left notes, documents. I searched his study, and I wrote a second letter to myself, really, hoping to divert suspicion onto someone else. Onto Mrs. Blakely," Miss Marple said sadly, "or Mr. Finch, or anyone convenient." Alice closed her eyes. "I never meant for it to go so far." The following day dawned with soft clouds drifting lazily across the sky. Miss Marple and Lavinia sat together in the garden while the police took Alice Mortimer into custody, not for murder, but for fraud, evidence tampering, and obstructing an inquiry. Lavinia sighed heavily. Such a clever young woman, so bright, how could she make such a dreadful mess of things? Miss Marple poured the tea with her customary grace. "Clever people, my dear Lavinia, are sometimes the most foolish. They imagine they can outthink consequences. She might have been forgiven." Lavinia said, "Her uncle died naturally." "Yes," Miss Marple agreed, "but guilt can drive a person into deeper misdeeds than any initial wrongdoing. Poor child." The village slowly returned to its gentle routines. Mrs. Blakely regained her composure. Harold Finch was relieved to discover his old record would remain quietly forgotten. Dr. Reeves seemed lighter, as though released from invisible burdens. Cyril Godfrey, much to Lavinia's amusement, became notably less pompous. On Miss Marple's final evening, Lavinia pressed her hand affectionately. "Jane, it's extraordinary how you always see the truth." Miss Marple smiled modestly. "Human nature, my dear. Once you understand it, everything becomes really quite simple." She glanced at the old blue and white teapot on the sideboard. Lavinia had kept it as a memento of the affair, cleaned thoroughly, of course, though. Miss Marple added gently, "I dare say one should take extra care when hiding things in teapots. They have a remarkable habit of turning up sooner or later. Lavinia laughed, and Miss Marple joined her, the warm June breeze carrying their voices through the fragrant garden. And so Little Brackston, like all proper English villages, settled once more into tranquil normalcy, until, of course, the next mystery arose, for where Miss Marple travelled, the quiet countryside seldom stayed quiet for long.